All right, we're going to slowly get started with this morning webinar on automation and workflows in analytics. Welcome everybody who could join, and hello, Victor.
Hey, hi there.
So maybe we'll do a quick introduction. Victor, why don't you get started, and I'll do my introduction after yours.
All right, thank you. Yeah, as Geoffrey mentioned, my name is Victor. I'm an analytics consultant at Bistry for about 2 years now, over 2 years actually. And I've been focusing mainly on Tableau desktop server and some data gathering and data governance. But lately we've been focusing on, or we've been thinking about workflow automation and how that actually works. And I've been triggered with that, with that setting, and that's why I was invited to this chat. So that's me.
Yeah, and I'm Geoffrey. I am the founder of Bistry, and I believe workflow automation is nothing really new within analytics, but it's something I think we want to inspire companies to think about as we see this trend going up into the market. So why don't we get started with some topics on this matter, Victor?
Indeed. So I think it could be a good idea to set the setting first, because most people might think of workflows in a different way. But what in our setting, what do you think a workflow actually is, or how would you define it?
Well, a workflow is in essence a repeatable process. So if in your company you have a repeatable process that you want to set into place, you would create a workflow behind it. It can be something like cleanup of a CRM system. It can be automatic stock reordering. It can be a cleaning up of pipeline, whatever it is. But most modern platforms or applications are supporting workflows in their applications, where you could put these processes into automated, repeatable processes, because that's, of course, the power of what we call robotic process automation, or the general workflow automation is a big upcoming trend within the most platforms you see out there today.
So when you talk about also robotics processing and all these things, that's really broad. But how do you think analytics and workflows are in this case correlated, or how can analytics help build your workflows?
Well, I think it's interesting, because look at your daily process. Let's assume we all have a dashboard, we know what a dashboard is, and we look at the dashboard, and on a daily basis, for example, at Bistry, I'd look at my planning dashboard, I would look at the pipeline dashboard, and I'll look at my P&L, probably every few days. So if you look at analytics and you're assuming that your dashboards or analytics are not embedded into any application, let's say you're using Salesforce, your dashboards are not embedded into Salesforce, a whole other topic where we can help you on. You'd open up your dashboard, you'll look at some insights, you make some analysis, maybe do some self-service, and you find some stuff out. And that's where you're going to take an action based off the information you just consumed. It's often a term we say to clients in our Inspire labs, where we talk about actionable insights and taking action and data-driven thinking. And it's always a bit baffling to me that you're in a dashboard, you see a situation, you confirm a situation by doing your own analysis, and then you take an action. What do? You go out of the dashboard, you go back to your CRM system or ERP system, and you go do something, or you go on your Slack or email or phone somebody and take an action. So why would you not be able to automate that action from the dashboard, or at least be able to trigger an action from the dashboard that jumps back to a workflow that is then being triggered from the background? So the whole point I want to make is why would we go out of in a system and out of a system again to go take that action? Why can't we stay inside of analytics and do an action-based trigger from there?
Cool, because when I thought of workflows beforehand, I thought that workflows was something merely being the automation of process or within a business to let's say to copy the behavior of a human. But in the end, in essence, analytics can then therefore help you take decisions based on your dashboard and your data. So that's really enhancing, right?
It's enhancing a little bit, because I think what you don't want to do, and what we've seen, and we've certainly made that mistake. I've certainly made that mistake. I'm all for super sales automation, and I want to have everything automated. And I got a comment from my own sales teams: is you can't automate everything. There's still the people side of the business, which is important. So you as a person need to be able to do your own actions and take actions based out of insights. And then we have the platforms like Salesforce, who are able to trigger some kind of workflows based on an action. So let's say there's a close date that is slipping, then Salesforce can automatically trigger a workflow on that. But I think it's sometimes also useful that you're inside of the analytics and then can trigger the workflow manually when it's required. So rather than do it manually, so that still the human intervention of saying, I need to take action, this is my action, and then it goes triggering a whole process. But basically, you're mostly inside your analytics, so why would you go outside of it? I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm pretty keen on that message.
It's quite important indeed. Yeah. How difficult do you think that setting up such a workflow would be? Let's say you have indeed a sales dashboard and you want to trigger an action within Salesforce. Do you think that is something easy to implement, or?
No, it's not difficult at all, especially not with the platform of choice that Bister uses is Tableau. Within Tableau, it's as easy as setting an URL action. So any tooltip or any data point can set an URL action, as you know, and that URL action can then trigger something from the Tableau dashboard. That being said, I do believe that platforms like Tableau and other platforms out there, you will see that they will start building their own mini workflow type of service within the platform that will be able to generate that. But I don't think that's really super required. I think most of the stronger platforms that require workflows, like, again, I'm going to mention Salesforce here, but even other platforms like SAP have deep integrated workflow automation solutions in there. And it's just a matter of enabling our platform through APIs or through an URL action to actually trigger that workflow in that platform on the back end. And mostly it's as simple as a simple API call, or even more simple, a simple URL action that goes away and triggers something from a dashboard.
And you've mentioned Salesforce and Tableau a couple of times now. That should integrate quite nicely, of course, with the acquisition of Tableau. Do you think that people or companies should spend more energy and money on the integration of different platforms? For example, Tableau within, as you mentioned, SAP or another a wider platform, let's say?
Yeah, but I think harmonization and integration are key in this period. So maybe some of our listeners today, our viewers today, have seen this. We've certainly seen this, where you had this explosion of, there's still an explosion of software as a service applications that couldn't do anything. I think I've seen a talk once that small, medium enterprises like ours have roughly 30 to 40 different SaaS applications running in their first years, because they just growth hack their way up. And I think there's a consolidation exercise there. We see that bigger players are offering all those integrations and solutions there. But I think it's important for any company that wants to be truly data-driven and provide actionable insights to actually embed Tableau within any application they have, whether it's Salesforce or SAP or another application, that Tableau just lives inside of the application as it's a part of the application, which is technically very easy to do. Again, we have a lot of embedding workshops and labs around that topic. And then see if we can then integrate some of the actions inside of the analytics to then trigger workflows or applications that are required to do so. And I think that's the true digitalization story that you need as a company to be able just to have everything harmonized in one place.
Yeah, I think that sounds magical. We've talked about pipeline dashboards and how you can trigger such a workflow in to go, for example, to into your CRM or into your application to take action.
Yeah.
What other examples will you think of when it comes to workflow automation?
Well, there's one on the business side, there's one on the technical side. So let's jump to a technical example for a minute. So let's say you're a Tableau admin, and this is actually an example of one of our clients where, as a Tableau admin, let's say it was a bigger client of ours, has I think about close to 15,000 users globally on the platform. And in a true data-driven culture, you want to allow your business users to publish data sources themselves and have some freedom. Now, as a Tableau admin, that can be sometimes a nightmare, because if somebody publishes a data source, you know this, Victor, that is not efficient or running quite slow, that can impact the complete performance of your Tableau server. So what you would do as an admin is, of course, you're going to build a dashboard that monitors slow running data sources. So any data source that would go above, let's say, 10 seconds to refresh or 15 seconds to refresh, I'm just saying something here, you get an alert as an admin. But why don't you go a step further, and by using, for example, a Python script, you could say, okay, all these data sources that are running longer than 15 seconds, an alert is being generated on the back end, that process is being killed or paused, and the user is notified automatically by email and saying, hey, your data source was running slow, we paused it, and these dashboards have been now not refreshed, please take action or get in touch with us how we can enhance your data source. That's a simple example of workflow automation, which makes your life as an admin easier.
Yeah, I've seen a similar example as a Tableau admin as well, where we had this company I was working for, and they had a lot of data which couldn't be shared externally because the data was was highly secure and should have been couldn't be shared with other ones. So the other people didn't have access to their Tableau server, and the only way to provide those reports to the partners was through PDF bursting. And one of the most simple examples of workflow automation is just a trigger that you say, okay, now is the time to distribute those reports, and you could create an entire workflow based on the REST API or a tab command in order to distribute those reports. It's a simple example, but I think that also counts as some sort of workflow automation. And it doesn't have to be technical at all, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of use cases there.
But also on the business side, we're now looking at the technical things, but if you look at the business side of things, let's say stock rotation, stock adjustments, always an interesting one, especially now. We just launched this whole new campaign on new to normal, and a topic we talk quite a bit about in some of the vertical examples is that I think it was McKinsey who basically had a report coming back saying that consumption patterns right now due to COVID are completely uncertain. It's really hard to predict how consumers are actually buying. So we see platforms going 1,000% up, we see other platforms just dropping completely. So having that consumption pattern in place is something that's really important for companies that have a lot of stock and stock movements. So if you look at that adjustment there, you can't predict your stock anymore. The problem is going to be is that you need to be able to trigger manual processes to adjust really fast. Whether it's moving stock from different locations to other locations, whether it is really able to order a stock ordering process very fast, those things. So most companies, ordering stock is not just buying some new product, but it's actually a whole process that needs to be triggered with a purchase order and a workflow behind it, and a bunch of people need to be notified. You could say that, again, I wouldn't automate it completely, but I would say in a dashboard where we see, okay, this consumption pattern is going down, and that can be do some forecasting techniques you do with Python integrated with your Tableau dashboard, whatever it is, but you see a certain problem of stock coming down and you need to adjust very fast. you could again do an URL action that triggers a workflow that then notifies your purchasing department, and in your backend system triggers a bunch of workflows that say we need to adjust stock for this market. And for people managing that business line, managing that whole supply chain, I think it's a very easy example than just have to go, okay, I have to shoot an email, I have to open my system, I have to trigger this workflow. Why not trigger it from the dashboard?
Exactly.
You could also do it automatically, but yeah, then you have to be really secure about that you exactly know what to do, because automating everything can also be risky.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's always risks, right? It's not always fun and games. That you could automate everything perfectly, but then if something goes south, then you're really into trouble. So what would your advice be there? Would you automate everything, or would you do like 80%, 90% of the job and have final confirmation of a human being to say this is the action to take?
It depends on your business and your use case. I'll give a bad example of automating where I got on a few people's nerves within Bistory, within the sales team, where I had this automation set up that would trigger a workflow every time, let's say, we had a high touch deal. A high touch deal for me was 6-figure deals. A 6-figure deal hasn't been contacted in 5 days. The salesperson would get these notifications on Slack and an email saying, hey, you hadn't touched a deal in 5 days. Any other people, because they got the notifications and they say, trust us, if it's a 5 or 6-figure deal, we're on top of it. And it's not, if it's not being touched for 5 days, maybe there's a good reason. Person has vacation, person has to get on hold. So that's a bad example of too much automation and annoying people. So think of the middle ground and always think of people. So in general, and I'm going to blab too much here probably, we always say there's 3 important factors if you look at your analytics. It's your tech that you're using, of course, Tableau, Snowflake, best solutions you can have. It's your data that you need to leverage, and all data should be accessible to everybody, and it's your people. And those 3 things have to work very good aligned. Without happy people, you won't get happy data results.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was also thinking, because you mentioned predicting the stocks for certain markets. Is this something because I think last week the newest version of Tableau was released? Is this something that the new features of Tableau Prep, for example, can help with? Combining this with Python and then writing it back to a database, or how do you see this?
Absolutely. I think if you look at data prep tools and the market, I think Tableau Prep is becoming a fantastic product. So Tableau Prep is of course your data preparation flow and solution, but it can trigger any Python or R script out there, and a Python script can do about anything. If you look at what our competition is doing, like Alteryx, for example, Alteryx talks a lot about analytical process automation, and basically these things are perfectly possible with prep also out of the box, because if you can use a prep flow to trigger any Python script, that's an amazing example of doing workflow automation from the prep side. For example, if you would do a prep script that runs every time and does a check on your data using a Python script that's being triggered on your stock and is looking at the history of a dashboard and is looking at a Python script that's going to forecast a little bit, for example, that could be a running flow that's then optionally triggering a workflow on the back end. So with prep, I think there's a lot of examples you can do to not only prepare your data, but also to check on some facts and then trigger optionally some Python scripts you've written to do some action points.
And more importantly, maybe as well, you can do it at scale now, right? Because you can write back to database, and that used to be, or could have been a problem in the past. I think that's going to be a big plus in the near future.
Absolutely. So then you're doing a complete circle around, because if you do have a prep flow checking on something and a Python script runs a certain flow, which then, let's say, causes not a more complex alert in some areas of your business. That alert can now be written back to one flag in your database, and that dashboard can then pick up those flags, and then you can, as a manager, see, okay, we have problem zones on these pieces of analytics, on these pieces of area. So that's really interesting to really have that complete flow running. So don't see prep only as a data prep solution, see prep as something that can trigger a lot more stuff, especially if you have a data science team with Python scripts and doing fantastic things with R. Get them to know prep and get them to know Tableau, because if they can integrate those both, then you're onto something.
Yeah, you can generate knowledge out of prep, right? You can have actions, but really some really deep knowledge. I think that's certainly interesting.
Sure.
There was one thing I noticed us talking about a bit before. We were talking about RPA and how that differs from workflows. For me, it's RPA is mostly copying people's behavior and the behavior of process within a business. How do you think that differs from workflows? For example, now in prep, that's just the flow of data and then taking your data further to take actions. But what all other differences do you see there in that sense?
Well, I feel purely from a theoretical point of view, I'm not a super expert in RPA, so forgive me if there's RPA experts and I offend them, but I think RPA is what you say indeed, the mimicking of manual processes, and workflow automation is more on complex processes. You can probably automate without human interaction or mimicking human interaction. But if I had to make a comparison, stuff we're talking about is probably RPA light, as I can mention it like that. I would call it the light version of RPA, whereas complex RPA is a completely other business area.
Okay,
that's my personal view.
That's your take. Yeah, but I think it makes sense. To me, it's also very interesting to see how these workflows will evolve in the future, because now we've seen that integrating different platforms can still be a bit of a challenge. So I think once we've overcome this bigger challenge, I think the possibilities are endless, right?
Absolutely. I think you see a lot of platforms out there, like let's take MuleSoft for an example, or Trade.io or Zapier. MuleSoft, of course, being part of the Salesforce family. MuleSoft is a beautiful example of an integration, enterprise integration software that can stitch everything together, because most platforms have rich APIs, and MuleSoft can easily integrate within together. It's even easier maybe to think of not to start writing calls to call all those different applications, but to have MuleSoft in the middle and have Tableau trigger MuleSoft processes, then triggers all the applications on the back end of it, or your Trade.io or your Zapier or whatever integration solution you have running, is to have Tableau launch that and then trigger all the applications behind it. Because I know I've been talking about harmonization and consolidating everything, but the reality of the companies out there is that we still have a lot of platforms that we need to stitch together. And that's where, especially in enterprise, these complexer integration tools like MuleSoft come into play, or pipelining tools like Matillion or Fivetran, that can then be triggered from Tableau dashboards or prep flows.
Yeah,
or
so
vice
I think
versa.
A lot of work to do still, but also a lot of potential, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think beyond analytics for a while. That was the idea of this session as we're coming to the end, but also think that how can we then make those those insights actually actionable, using some light workflow automation and triggering. And if you need any help, or you're inspired by this and you want to have a deeper conversation, have a chat with us, and we'll help you figure it out. It's not rocket science. We can set it quite fast, and we can show you some real advantages on the business side.
Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
Really sums it up.
Well, we do have some time for questions. So I'm going to see if there's any questions out there. It's a heavy topic maybe for some, but we're going to give a few seconds. Somebody asked about the reference we say is MuleSoft. MuleSoft is an integration solution bought by Salesforce a few years ago, and it's spelled M-U-L-E soft. I'll put it on the chat also, MuleSoft. There we go. That's one question we got. Well, with that being left, I'm just going to make some advertisements for other skill ups. So keep your event page from Bistory into your calendars, because there's some cool other events coming up. And I also want to ask you to take a look at our New to Normal campaign. If you go to newtonormal.com, we are launching a campaign on how we help companies leverage their most important assets, data and their people, and how we use our labs. And labs are things we use to learn, adapt, and build to adapt to this new normal. And we have a lot of stories and examples we're using on like the consumption pattern one I used to show companies the way how data analytics can even help your gut feeling and your experience to become better and faster in this rapidly changing world, especially with COVID-19. That being said, thank you. I'll put the link for New to Normal also on the site, on the chat, and then I will thank you for all your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for the chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.